Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. For a special, unplanned, particularly nerdy episode, I'm going to be doing something different today. I know that I owe people comments from my last video. I also know that I am planning a more Lord of the Rings focused video based on some questions in my comments section, I think for the last two videos. That will be coming. I just am not at the point where I'm able to focus on that. I spent most of today kind of in a almost migraine state, better right now, which reminds me, I need to stir my caffeine. I have a mott tea over here. Let me just grab a spoon. It's a blend that is fittingly enough, considering the fact that I'm talking about nerdiness, it's named, or it's alludes to Hercule Poirot. The tea blend is called Mocha Nut Mott for the Little Grey Cells. So, cheers. I need the caffeine. Anywho. So acknowledging that I do owe comments and video based on comments. I also know that I'm behind in responding in Discord. I'm just behind and everywhere. And you might hear random noises in and out. For whatever reason, my VPN keeps letting me know constantly at the moment that it's turning itself on. I might go ahead and tell it to it's okay. I'm not on the internet. We can be offline right now. So let me go ahead and let my VPN know that it can take a break right now. So let me do that, because even if y'all can't hear it, it's annoying me. So let's put you on pause for an hour. Hopefully I'll be done recording by then. So hopefully it will stop making noise in a bit. Okay, so as I was saying, while my VPN continues to drive me insane until it acknowledges the fact that I told it to be quiet, today's particularly nerdy episode, or slightly different track on a nerdy episode, I wanted to discuss a different area of, not quite literature, but let's call it legends. Because I would argue that even though it might not be as highbrow as more traditional legend, myth, whatever, I would posit that maybe comics might be considered a part of American legend, considering the fact that there are different retellings throughout time. This seems to happen with legends as well, where there will be shifts in the way the story is told. And comics do have a particularly, at least a lot of the well-known names in comics, they have a particularly American focus. So what brought this on? I want to bring forth the comic that was the inspiration for this video. Fairly recently, there's just been a lot of change in comics. There's been a rebooting. I'm going to speak DC probably mostly because I don't read very much in the way of Marvel comics. I've always been more of a DC girl. I read Daredevil occasionally, and you will see a Daredevil pop up here. But for the most part, I am going to be more DC comics focused. Even though I will admit there are some good Marvel comics out there. I would suggest, I think it's a Jeff Loeb series, where he has Daredevil Yellow. There is Spider-Man Blue. I know there's a couple other ones in there. I think there's, I want to say it's Hulk Gray. I didn't read that one, though. But he has a series within there. And Jeff Loeb is usually a pretty good bet to go with anyway. He wrote both for DC Comics and for Marvel Comics. I believe I actually have a Jeff Loeb in here. He was also producer for Netflix Daredevil and the comic influence does show. Comic fans can see that there are specific callbacks to comics that maybe the average person who doesn't read comics would not be aware of. And I think particularly of second season, there's a scene with Punisher and Daredevil on a rooftop where Punisher gives Daredevil a very difficult choice. I don't want to go too much more in detail for risk of ruining it for people who haven't seen the show before, but suffice to say that it could have been ripped directly from the comics. While I was watching it, I was having a complete geek moment, being like, oh my gosh, I remember the comic this came from. But anyway, by the way, anything Punisher Daredevil is pretty good. I love that dynamic. But that's not what brought me today. I am not terribly fond of the direction DC Comics has been going in recent days. I wasn't a fan of the New 52. I didn't feel like you needed to reboot and so drastically change everything. I do know that reboots have happened throughout comic history. You can point, I think it was Crisis on Infinite Earths. There's been periods of time where you've had either a soft reboot or a reboot, when you're headed into the different ages. Not terribly fond of the shortening of the timeline within DC Comics. I have to admit, I am a bigger fan of having the larger age gap between Bruce, Batman, and Nightwing, the first Robin, because there's always been a father-son dynamic. Shortening that age gap affects character dynamics, which anyone who has listened to me talk about storytelling and fiction will know that character dynamics is something that's very important to me. If you have an inconsistent character behavior or change a character dynamic after it's been one way for so long, it's going to bother me. I have been known to pan books that do not do a good job in either presenting their characters, or more frequently, they do a poor job in having consistency in character in such a way that it seems like they are unaware of the fact that they are being inconsistent. I can think of one book in particular. It was they were trying to write a story about Miss Bates and her mother. And this is the two women from Emma. They were periphery characters, and they decided to write their story. And I was interested because they were periphery characters, and therefore it would have been nice to hear that background. Unfortunately, they chose to, while in the narrative, they wanted you to believe that Miss Bates' mother was a very calm person, a very composed person who was basically trying to keep her daughter, Miss Bates, kind of in line, and be the calming influence there. So at one point they would represent her as this, but then in other sections her decisions were just like all over the place, and what they seemed to want to present, and what they actually presented with the characters' actions and words were very much not matching up. So that kind of thing is something that I think impedes good storytelling. And I know within comics, this will be something that through the years, you'll see things change. But if things too drastically change character dynamics, and you did see this, I feel, when they try to mix things up with the reboot of the New 52, trying to split off the long-time relationship of Lois Lane and Clark Kent, try to make more of a Diana Wonder Woman and Clark Kent relationship. Destruction of long-time relationships just cause well, it's just like when they try to do, I think it's a comic book, I think it's called One More Day. It's notorious in comic circles. It's a Spider-Man comic where they just decided they didn't want Spidey to be married anymore. They wanted him to be appealing once more to the younger readers. So they magically destroyed the MJ and Spider-Man relationship as if it had never been, because reasons. And they had this whole convoluted thing with Aunt May and all this sort of crap. And the whole point was to destroy a long-term relationship without any actual storytelling involved. They didn't destroy the relationship as a result of the character's actions, which, while it would have been sad, it would have been good storytelling. But to just be like, we don't want this relationship anymore, so magic. No, that's lazy. And that's kind of the way I feel with the way New 52 just decided to destroy certain aspects of storytelling because. Now, they have been trying to walk things back a little bit with Rebirth, from what I understand, but I feel like you just, it's not working. So the things you're going to be seeing are older comics and a newer comic that is an attempt to walk back some of these changes, but by creating their own new legend, for lack of a better term, their own new franchise. And this is Rippaverse Comics. It is a new comic company out there, let's say. So they're doing their own thing. So this is their first comic, and to be absolutely fair with them, I'm sure that if I was to compare this to the first Superman, the first Batman, the first Captain America, I'm sure it would do quite well in comparison. Or, because every first is hard. But because I am comparing it to where comics are now, it does come up short. And the comic's name is Isom. This is actually my dad's comic. I got it for him, I want to say for Christmas. And when I asked him what he thought about it fairly recently, because I hadn't read it yet, he was like, I don't know, it just didn't quite hit. I don't know. There's certain things that bothered me. And I was like, well, can I read it? He said, yeah, sure, go ahead. And when I came out of it, sorry, let me get a drink of tea. I kind of found that I agreed, and I will explain why, and then I will compare it to other comics, multiple comics, so we have multiple examples of what I'm talking about. So if you are not a comic fan, this might not be something that's enjoyable for you. I will discuss storytelling. I will be discussing art. But this is kind of going to go a bit into nitty-gritty. I am a huge comic nerd. I am one of those people who not only will read comics, I will go to the various comic databases, look up characters. I know way more about comic characters than is really probably healthy for me. But keep that in mind. This might be more detailed than you'd be interested in. So this is Isom. And this is a first-time comic. I do think that I got the coolest cover for him because I looked at the ones previous because they just weren't quite as good. I think this might be the best one. And here's the back with Isom. Now, I think the back does sort of should have given a warning, perhaps, to what was to come. This art, in and of itself, when you're looking at it as a still piece of art, is not bad necessarily, but it isn't good comic art. And I'll explain why. This comic, even though you can tell he's supposed to be moving, it doesn't feel like movement. It feels like still life. It doesn't feel like you're watching a character in motion. It feels like someone just took a snapshot at that moment, but still managed, or like he was posing. That's what it feels like. It feels like he was posing for the camera, and that they kind of had things around him, but not like he was so much moving. And my dad and I haven't been able to quite figure out why. I think it might have something to do with the inking. I'm not sure, but it doesn't feel like actual movement. And I do believe that the guy can draw. But the first thing that I noticed, before I even noticed the artwork, is it feels like you're being thrown in really quickly. A lot of times something I've noticed within comics is when you get thrown in with a bunch of characters you don't know, you will generally get something. So they have this one character speak on TV, and in the next little panel, you have what looks to be a police officer saying, what do we have to do to get some credit around here? Now, if I was reading, say, a DC comic, and even if this wasn't a first DC comic, you do sometimes see this, and say this was Harvey Bullock, or this was Jim Gordon, you would have the character say that, and then you would oftentimes see is like a little panel, and they have something like that later on that I feel like they really do underuse. So it'd be like a panel that looks like that. And usually what you would see, or that I've seen, is that they will have this character say, what do we have to do to get some credit around here? And then underneath that, or off to the side, you would have Jim Gordon, commissioner of Gotham Police. And you might even have something like a good cop in a bad system, or something like that. Even if you just had Commissioner Jim Gordon, commissioner of Gotham Police, they would at least generally have that information. So you're like, oh, that's who is talking right now. You're being thrown into the world, but you're also having a little bit of narration to push you along. And they don't do that here. You don't know who's talking. And they don't do a really good job. Actually, they don't do it all in this little page. They don't kind of give you an idea of who's talking at all. You just are thrown into here and you're like, what is going on? Who's talking? Why do I care? And you just get a feeling of confusion. And this is something that it just doesn't feel like you get that feeling of movement, even though also you hear this wham here. For some reason, this character, what is this wham? I don't know what it is. I don't know. Okay, well, it says slamming the door. But by that movement, I don't get the feeling of slamming the door by this movement. I don't get the feeling of slamming the door. It just doesn't feel like movement. Now, to be fair to this writer, I think they do, and this artist, I feel they do a bit of a better job on the next page. You have a nice little thing that tells you where you're at, and I do think that this movement is actually pretty good. It does feel like he is punching that bag, and I think actually the next one is too. This is probably some of the best art I have seen in here that gives a feeling of movement. But you do feel throughout this comic that you are being thrown in. This page probably does the best for that, those boxes that you will oftentimes see in comics. But a lot of times, I just don't feel like there's a lot of feeling of movement. Now, this one is good. I think they did a good job there. Actually, that one's not bad either. But most of these pages, I just don't feel like I'm convincingly seeing movement. And I feel like we're being thrown into these relationships that we're seeing these interactions and we don't get a whole lot of understanding of what's going on. We don't get to feel, we don't really know this character. We're not really getting a good introduction to this character. This is not necessarily the best origin story. We know that there's been something before, but we don't know what. And if this was something in the middle of a run, okay, there's other things I could point back to. But this is not a great first story. I don't know how he got his abilities. I barely know who he is. I just know he has unspecified abilities. I think he might be strong. He seems to be strong, but you have these other characters that are thrown in that seem to have some sort of powers, and they don't explain a whole lot about them. Now, I think this is a fairly good panel right there. Actually, this one's not bad either. But, see, like, right there's where that I can feel some of the movement. I mean, he's a bit dodgy. He feels a bit flat there, but they got pretty good movement with her. And I think, it's part of, as well, he doesn't always feel like the character's coming well off the page. And I do think there is something of an inking problem here. And I was discussing this with my dad, where one of the things that has been mentioned with the Rippaverse is they're also picking up people who, for good or for bad, people who based on not agreeing with certain views of certain people in mainstream comics have gotten fired for certain people they follow or whatever. So they did pick up someone fairly recently, and whatever you want to say about whether or not you agree with an ideology of one way or another, an ideological based hiring is probably not the best way to go. And the feeling I got was perhaps Rippaverse is making a mistake that a lot of companies seem to right now, which is to hire based on ideology versus on talent. And I do think this is showing here. And no matter what end you're on of any certain political issue, once you start hiring based on ideology, you are defeating yourself. You just need to create good work. And I feel that maybe ISOM is falling, the Rippaverse might be falling into some of the same traps that we're seeing in some of the other comic areas, where it's so focused on making an ideological point either in their hiring or in their other things that they're doing, that they're missing what comics has always made comics a joy, which is storytelling. And there is, I think, a story buried in here, and I think they're trying, but I don't know that this was a good first comic. The storytelling kind of feels all over the place. You feel confused most of the time. I think some of the panels could be shrunk down to be more bare bones instead of less talk. Just, there's so many. I think the art could have been better. I think the storytelling could have been better. I think that there could have been so much better of an introduction to this character. There are some relationships that I see will possibly be enjoyable in the future. He looks like he has a good relationship with his sister, a good relationship with his niece. There is a building of a nemesis, I believe. There seems to be a good relationship with a coworker. Actually, this kind of feels like very flat artwork. He almost feels like he's like a toy or something there. Although this one isn't too bad there. That does feel like there's a feeling of something there. But they leave you off and they don't ever resolve that. Now, I know sometimes things will not get resolved within a comic, but by the end of this particular comic, usually when you finish with a big one like this, you at least get a little bit of something. But they kind of left this guy's storyline. And maybe they will hit it later on. But this just felt so disjointed. I get the general idea of what they're going for. But I didn't leave feeling like I knew who Isom was. I didn't leave feeling like I really cared about Isom. I care a little bit more about his sister and his niece than I care about him. But honestly, I wanted to like this better than I did. And maybe this needs a second or third read before I get it more. But I was disappointed in this. Now, I want to compare it, to keep it from being completely a negative thing, I want to compare it to some older comics. Ugh. Now, this is pre-New 52, so you are going to be seeing, excuse me, some older things. Not old. Sorry. Let me take another drink and I will continue. Let's see, this one here is, what's this one done? We've got a 2000 comic here. I think this one's probably around the same time. This one's 2001. Oh, this was a good one. I remember this one. This is part 1 of 5. This was a good one. Another 2000. This one was an interesting one. Good artwork, too. 2000. I'll probably start with the Daredevil and then go into the DC. Oh, it doesn't give me a year for this one. Maybe at the end. I wouldn't be shocked if this is around the same time period. No, it doesn't give me a time period. Well, that's not fair. Trying to see if one of the comic things on the back. Oh wait, hang on. Let me see if it's here. 2006. This one is 2001. So you're starting to see a pattern here. A lot of the ones that I think are from like the peak period of comics are gonna be late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, 2001. I couldn't find Hush, which is one of my favorites. You have Jim Lee artwork. I can't remember who does the storytelling for that. I don't know that it's Jeff Loeb, although it might be. I'm also thinking Batman Year One. That was good. Long Halloween, Dark Victory, peak comic period. This is Bruce Wayne Murderer. This was 2002. That's right. This was within Gotham Knights. I really enjoyed the Gotham Knights series. Also attached to this is Bruce Wayne Fugitive, which is also very good. I just picked up one of them to show them. You're going to see a lot of Gotham Knights because I did enjoy this series. I tried to not have all of them be Gotham Knights. 2002. This one, okay, so you have an interesting mixture here of Frank Miller and Jim Lee. Love Jim Lee artwork, which is why I picked this up. I don't particularly love Frank Miller's decision-making with the way he handles either Dick Grayson's Robin or Bruce Wayne here, but you can never fault the fact that he does have some dynamic storytelling here, and Jim Lee is just an amazing artist. And then this is just a good one to show. Batman, Superman, Public Enemies. And what year is this? This actually had a cartoon that was based off of it. That was actually fairly decent. 2005. So let me just go, and we'll start with the Daredevil to compare and contrast to Poor Isom. So already, I kind of feel like you can see a difference between Daredevil. Okay, this is Brubaker run. Okay. Daredevil, where he has Foggy Nelson, you can already feel the movement of that and the emotion here. Versus here, there's some movement there, but there's not a whole lot of emotion. Even here where they're going for an emotion, I just feel, if I was to pick based on a dynamic feel, I would pick, now this is Daredevil, of course, but say I didn't even know this is Daredevil. Say I never heard of Daredevil. I still think I would go with this one. It just has a more appealing feel to it. And I wish I could say that I really wanted to like Isom. And I couldn't. I wanted to show, I don't have some of the other ones I might have wanted to compare with it in physical form. I really enjoyed a more recent comic that was the Defenders, not the older Defenders where you had Doctor Strange. I think She-Hulk might have been in. I mean the one that came after the TV show, which did have Luke Cage, Iron Fist, not Iron Fist, Danny Rand. I think it is Iron Fist, but I can't remember for sure. Danny Rand, Jessica Jones, and Daredevil. And that one was a good series. I don't have it to compare because it's only on Kindle that I have it. But I do want to show, look, first of all, mood. Look at the mood of this. You get the feeling of shadow. And that's, I wonder if that's partially it. The lines are too crisp. These lines are too crisp. The shadows are not convincing. Okay, that might have something. My dad and I have not been able to figure this out. And that's one of the things when you possibly are hiring based on ideological reasons. Sometimes there's not enough different kinds of talent to look at this and be like, hey, this isn't working. You might want to take this back. You might want to look at this again. Marvel and DC over the years, you have people like, okay, I studied under, I studied under this guy, then under this guy. And so you have this wealth of knowledge coming through the years that pass on different things. Now, don't get me wrong, DC and Marvel are making their own mistakes now, but DC and Marvel does have something going for them insofar as, at least in certain areas, they can point to this long period of talent through the years where they can have someone say, okay, this doesn't work, try this. This inking doesn't work. This coloring doesn't work. This way of telling the story does not work. How about you ask him? How about you look at this comic that comes before? Isom does not have the benefit of that long line of he trained under him and under him and under him and, you know, so on and so forth. And I think, I don't know who did the artwork for this. Is it that I'm guessing that the Armada might have. I'm not familiar with this particular artist, but I have to tell you, I am a fan. The mood with that shadows. Then later on, let's see, a good fight movement. I do like this shot of Foggy looking through that broken window. Again, this guy does do mood well. I do feel like you get a feeling of movement when he turns his head back to talk. Again, another, not only good use of shadows, I feel like you do get a bit of a feeling of movement there. Actually, I could see this movement in my head. This is very well done. And again, emotion. So I can't necessarily point to the fight scenes in this one way or another, but I feel like, ooh, that's a good one for Foggy right there. Him climbing out of here. I like that feeling of movement here. So that is, I think, something that this particular comic does well for Daredevil. Oh, again, right there. That's nice. Where you get a feeling of mood, a feeling of emotion. I mean, the artwork here is really nice. And I think there has to be something said. Okay, so you're looking, if you look closely, let's look at this panel I just showed you and compare it to something from Isom. So to look at Isom here, the lines, they are always crisp. The shadows are, you know, they're there, but they are also fairly crisp. Everything is just, there's not a whole lot of dramatic feel here. There are points where you do have shadows, but everything just feels so crisp. I think this probably is one of the better ones with shadows, but still the lines are very crisp. And I want to show that panel I just showed you. So we're looking, I'm not actually sure who, okay, I think this might be Foggy here. But look here, the lines are not crisp. You can actually see a little break in the inking there. And sometimes I think going away from a crisp feel and going more towards a, what's called like an what do they call it? A painterly feel when they're talking about painting. It's more about the emotion. I mean, you can see here, like when they inked this here for the door, it's not a crisp. I can see where he might have, instead of, he just sort of did this, like you tend to do when you're coloring something in, and it's not a crispness here. It doesn't look like, I don't know if he did the artwork digitally for Isom, or if I don't know. It feels too crisp. It feels like almost you could take an action figure out of it or something. It doesn't have a mood to it. And I have to give whoever this artist is just a lot of credit for a feeling of movement, a feeling of emotion, a feeling of mood. So this is Daredevil. Here we go, Matt. The next one I want to compare to Isom is, okay, this is a Batman Legends of the Dark Knight, The Demon Who Laughs. And this is actually 2 out of 4. And I think I had a particular panel I wanted to show for this. This isn't a comic I know quite as well as some of the other ones. But I think it was a particular panel with, let's see. Okay, actually, I think this might have been it. So, ignoring Joker in the background, which isn't a bad thing, I like this panel with Roz. This is Ra's al Ghul, and you have a feeling of movement with that wind. It has something, a feeling of movement, a feeling of just reality to it. And you're talking about, you have the Joker in the background. It's not, I can't think of anything, too much less realistic than having, the Joker in the background. Let's see, I know I had something with Barbara I wanted to show. I do talk about some feeling of, I like the shot of his eyes. Not too, I don't feel like it's too crisp. It doesn't feel too perfect. You got that little bit of cross-hatching shadowing going on there, which I think that Isom could stand to use the cross-hatching shadowing a bit more than it uses it. And it makes just good use of its shadowing in doing his eyes here. And I mean, I wouldn't argue that every older comic is perfect in the way it handles things, but you can tell where there's just years of things that they can pull from. And they don't shy away from using some techniques that are perhaps, maybe underused in Isom, where, okay, it's not necessarily the best piece of art I've ever seen in comics, but you do have that feeling of movement of art. You can see the small lines of movement that they're trying to give Barbara to express her emotion. Which, if you are aware of these characters, there is a lot of emotion going on in this situation. I do like the shot of Alfred. You have the feeling that he just stopped for a second and turned to listen to Bruce, or half turned his head to listen to Bruce while he was doing something else. What else here? I think this might be the main points I wanted to pull from this one, just because I'm not as familiar with this particular comic, and I wouldn't even say that this is my favorite of the comics, although I do like the shadowing for this guy's face. It's not too crisp. It gives you a feeling of, I don't know, it's not flat. There is a couple points here where, I don't know, they do some good shadowing, in here at points, but I don't always get a feeling of depth in the same way. And this artist is not bad. There is feeling of depth. A lot of his issues seem to be shadowing, and even more with the shadowing, there's a lot of crisp lines that go on here. And I can see points where he did shadowing fairly well. It's just, I don't know, it's missing something. So that's Legends of the Dark Knight, Demon Who Laughs. Whoops. This one was an interesting concept. This is the reign of Emperor Joker, Superman in Action Comics. And I forget what the premise was. This was just kind of an out there comic. But right here, talk about emotion and movement. Right there with the Joker, being his typical Joker self. Just also creative use of a panel that, again, not every artist uses their panels in the same way, but everything is pretty simple in your dealing with. It's a pretty standard panel use when you're seeing Isom. I also don't necessarily get the feeling like right here that he's falling, even though I know he is. Just some good stuff here. You got some movement, some emotion there with him. I gotta tell you, this guy can draw Joker. And who is the artist for this? I'm not actually not as familiar with this artist. Is this Kano? Kano? Huh, I don't know this guy. He's good, though. He does a very good job with the Joker. Okay, I'll tell you what. If you can do emotion with Bruce's mouth non-existent and his eyes covered, that's good art. Even that, and then right there, emotion with eyes covered, no mouth. And it just is, gotta love this here again. There's things that are being, oh man, this is just a good page for demonstrating what good artwork can do to storytelling. You could tell that if Bruce could speak, Clark would be getting it right now. Like, Clark would be hearing it. Harley's emotion here. And this is traditional Harley, not the way they've been drawing her recently. Great page of emotion of, this is just sort of the way comics are supposed to feel. Whew, nice here. Look at that. And let's see a comparison page of a similar idea where a character gets smacked. Now, I guess this would be... Okay, so you have... it's fairly good movement here. He got whacked. He got thrown back. But look how much more dynamic. First of all, you've got the colors. Much more dynamic with the Joker here. And just... It's got... it grabs you more. It's just a more interesting page. And there's more emotion in this page. There's, I can't really feel what's going on here. I just can't connect to it. Whereas even if all I saw was this panel, I'm not reading the story, there is a ton of emotion. Take away even the words here. There is emotion within this page. You can feel Clark's pain. You can feel Joker's anger. This is how good artwork and good storytelling through artwork is done. Let's see. Oh, this is a good panel. Okay, so it's going across 2 pages. You got Clark's emotion here, and look at Joker there. This is a great comic. And I'm not saying this is not necessarily the peak of storytelling. Oh, this is such a good panel. Don't think about the storytelling too much, but look at this right here. I don't know if you can see it well, but when you're looking at up close, this is just, I don't even have to look at the words to feel the emotion of Bruce's posture. Bruce's posture is doing most of the storytelling, but that's what good artwork does. Clark's expression here. It brings across feeling even without seeing the words. And I think that's part of what Isom is lacking, is besides the clunkiness of the storytelling, the artwork just does not convey mood. It does not convey emotion. I need to reread that. I gave my dad all my comics. I couldn't find certain ones. And I know he owns Hush. I don't know where he's hiding Hush. He must be upstairs. There's certain comics I can't find because I think he squirreled them away somewhere. I can't get to them. I know I have a couple of comics that I only was able to get in physical form. And I think he must have squirreled them somewhere because I don't know where they're at right now. Okay, so let's see. Which one next? Let's do another Gotham Knights. Because I liked a couple things about the way the storytelling was done in this. Okay, seriously? Barbara's desk. Gotta feel that. I mean, how many times? I don't know. I've fallen asleep on my desk and be like, oh my gosh, all my stuff all over the place. So I do like this beginning here. I do feel like it's dynamic. I do feel like it's interesting. And one thing, I don't know, it's the artwork in Isom feels, like I said, very pristine, very sharp. And something that you look at old comics, you might run into older comics that have a bit of the sharpness, it doesn't feel nearly as pristine or sharp as Isom does. I don't know if, like I said, there's some digital work in here, which would make sense to me if there was, because there's something about just simple pencil to paper, pen to paper art that has a different feel to it. And they don't always feel the same. I love some of these views, like the view of Barbara through her. What is this? What am I looking through? I don't know what I'm looking through, but it's a mess. I guess this is a part of her kitchen. I'm not sure what I'm looking through, but I like that view there. I mean, I like the angle here. There's just this storytelling. The way they chose to do the artwork for this is interesting. There's points, especially when you know the Barbara Gordon storyline. You can feel, even if you don't know the Barbara Gordon storyline, I think you can feel the emotion of this panel. And then it's followed by these panels. This one I think is particularly good for the feeling of rain and how it's bouncing off of a character. It's not just existing around her, it's there. And I like that sometimes I think artists forget that the rain needs to, when they have a character in the rain, it needs to affect things like, I don't know, their hair, like it's doing to Barbara here. And you still have the rain, jumping off her knees, off her shoulder. Now, you can argue that Alfred is a bit pristine here, but I do believe that this is an artistic choice, and this isn't something you see throughout the artwork. So I'm okay with that. What else can I point to in this one? This one actually was pretty good, if I remember correctly, too. Actually, I do feel like I like this one, too. This feels, normally we're having a conversation, she's drying off, and I feel this mundane action of them peeling these apples actually does have something of a feeling of movement. What else do we have here? Let's see, I think that might be actually all I wanted to show here. Actually, I do like this with Jim. This ending page with, Jim Gordon bringing the stuff out of the kitchen and then him and Babs together with that pie I guess Alfred sent her home with. Now, I did actually, and this might not be the best one for the black and whites, but even the old black and whites they're showing in the back here, you can feel something right here. There's a feeling of mood and emotion right there that you don't necessarily get in some of the more pristine artwork. And that's without use of color. Feeling of movement, like, Bruce popping, don't tear his comic. We're dealing with, no, it's not Two-Face. I don't know this villain. So, yeah, with this particular villain, whoever he is, you can feel this movement here. And if you're looking a little closer at the comic, you can see the contact point that is represented there. So, there's that one. Let's see. This one comes from Legends of the Dark Knight. Actually, this is... Okay, let's talk about, again, the differences in artwork that you will get when you have pencil to paper, ink to paper. You don't have, you have this shadow that I think is well done. You've got some of the proportions in face. They're just fun. Comics do need something of fun as well. But look at the personality and emotion that just from this side view of Scarecrow. Very well done. Who is this artist? You're not going to tell me who the artist... Okay, hold on. Writer... there's the colorist, penciler, letterer, inker. Okay, so I guess the penciler, Paul Galassi. So I think I actually showed something with his work earlier. So you do get a feeling of emotion there. I love his expression here and the feeling of movement and expression in this little panel here. And look what I was talking about. You have the storytelling throughout with these internal thoughts that are going on, which actually DC uses I love this panel. Uses very well. This is great. Again, great use of paneling, great use of creative art. Something that I do notice with ISOM, it's I think I said this earlier, it's just very panel, 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 panel. Not very creative. Let's look at how they choose to panel here. Okay, instead of just going panel, 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 maybe a full page panel, you have in the background Scarecrow's very well drawn face, very good with emotion, just nice. And you have this panel here, you have another panel here. The storytelling is happening around this face. Great use of artwork and paneling in a way that ISOM is just not doing creatively. And you do also have the little boxes of inward things, storytelling, narrative. If you can get emotion through the Scarecrow's face with, that's great stuff there. Let's see what else we have here. I think he's good emotion here with Jim Gordon. And I think maybe the final page I might show is Selena. She looks a bit too satisfied with herself, wouldn't you say? But yeah, I think that this is something that is done well in this comic. The feeling of movement, the feeling of emotion. Emotion is particularly well done in this comic. So yeah, this is an enjoyable comic to look at, even just artistic. Ooh, I like this. Talk about shadowing. To use shadowing to promote emotion. And I don't think ISOM necessarily uses shadowing as creatively as it could either. I think that, this isn't bad use of shadowing, but I don't necessarily know that they use shadowing for the sake of emotion in quite the same way. And he is a good artist. I just don't know that he is currently at the point where it's peak comic artist. Tree. Let's finish that word. Let's see. This one was just a fun one. Actually, no, let's do... stay there. Sorry, my knitting pattern is trying to fall down and attack me. Stay there. Another Gotham Knights one. So let's say, right off the bat, let's start first page. You got Bruce here. You've got a little bit of emotion here. He's actually, oh my gosh, is that a humor there? Bruce has got some humor going on there. And then Alfred's expression over there. There is some emotion going on. There is some movement. Let's see. Again, use of the shadowing. There's points where he is almost completely in shadow, and that is a good character choice at times. You know, sometimes that's what you need for the storytelling. Actually, I like the way that they make use of emotion in her body language there. I think that if you, even without seeing the thought bubble, you can kind of tell what's going on there. This one too. I don't need to know what's being said here. There is emotion, and I could use shadow too, by the way. Let's see. You know, nothing big is necessarily going on here, but okay, first of all, here's her right here. You've got this really good emotion shot here. It actually feels like there's movement there. Even with her hair and stuff, that's just a good emotion shot. And then you have, it changes from that emotion to this one. And actually, where you have the emotion of, you know, stressfulness, just intensity, here you have that kind of like, okay, it's taken care of. We're good. It's a very good, I think it's good with lighting. I think it's a good use of emotion, particularly after you had this really great panel up here. I do like this for Barbara too. I mean, I don't know that this is necessarily anything story-wise, but again, you don't necessarily just have the crisp lines. Great use of shadow. This comic does a lot with the shadowing, which, I mean, for a Batman comic makes sense. I think, again, even with this being a black and white, you can have the feeling of emotion and even movement with this black and white. Not much, you know, there's not a whole ton of extra things going on here, but you get so much more from this there that I'm getting from, I get more feeling from this here. Actually, this whole page is pretty good for this, with the movement with the kids in the back, the sweating there. I mean, I think that it's just good storytelling through art. Let's see what else. All right, that's good for that. Should I go for one of the bigger ones? I might just work my way through the smaller ones first. So this one was an interesting one. I do remember the comic in retrospect. Who's the artist for this? I have to be careful with this one. Looks like this one got torn up a little bit at some point. So they don't have. Okay, here we go. So, oh, okay, that's Grayson. So pencils is Yvel Gush. I just can't pronounce that. So, not an artist I'm familiar with. And I mean, this probably isn't my favorite of the artwork that I've seen, but you do get some realistic feelings here. I do love this with Selena's eyes. You do get just a certain feel that's pretty nice. Let's see what else. I said this isn't necessarily my favorite of the artwork for. For the comics, now I do feel that you get a feeling of movement and emotion pretty well with that one there. But I mean, it's a pretty standard comic setup for this one. I do think there's just some, I mean, there's some nice artwork there. Just particularly this kid, they do a pretty good job with. I'm sorry, I do enjoy this, her expression, because you have a kid getting her attention there. I love this with the little girl there. Very innocent. And I mean, seriously, even if there's nothing else going on with this story, Catwoman walking a little girl holding her hand. Yeah, I can't even. Her expression there while she's listening. I actually had to see what she's talking about. Let's see what else going on here that might be interesting. Now this one here, I actually am not as familiar with this character. I think her name's Jade. Did it say at some point? Oh, I'm sorry, Jenny Lynn Hayden. I guess she was the daughter of the first Green Lantern, which would have been Alan Scott. So I guess that's why she's green. I like the movement, the feeling movement with her putting on her coat. Actually, even with her, with this bag right here. I actually do enjoy, this is my favorite, Dick Grayson's always been my favorite, whatever, as Robin, of course, as Nightwing, but I was very mad when they took away the Robin role from Tim Drake. This is, you know, the last Robin that they should have gone with. Retconning Damian, and it wasn't my favorite. But that feeling of movement with lightning behind him, with him opening up that staff of his, very cool. I actually even feel like this little panel here is nice. You get a feeling of her actually pushing against the guy holding her. Let's see what else. Just a great shot for a feeling there that's just nice. I don't know. I just don't get these same feelings when I read the other. Part of it might be because I'm just more knowledgeable of these characters. Sorry, this is just cute. Her against her dog. Again, we're talking about rain affecting characters' hair. Right there. even Tim's. Look at that face. Look, even the black and white where it look. Oh, that's right. I forgot the dog stopped breathing and she made him do mouth to mouth. That's what he's doing there. He's doing mouth to mouth to the darn dog. That's why he's making the face there. I don't know why she couldn't do mouth to mouth to her own darn dog. Why she made him do it. Okay. I do like the artwork with Nightwing here. I mean, good shadows. Even when you're dealing with Supergirl here, I feel like you do get, even though her lines are going to be perhaps more pristine than when you're dealing with someone like Nightwing, who as one of the bats is going to be more in the shadows, you still get this, this must be a period of time for whatever reason she had fire wings? I don't know. This is not a character that I generally read. But you do get a feeling of movement with her here. I don't know why she has fire wings, but Kara has fire wings right now. Look at the feeling of movement right there when she punched those guys. Again, with breaking that, you're dealing with a character who I believe, like I said, Ison has strength. I don't get necessarily the same feeling of movement when he's using his strength. Let's see. I do feel like you get they do try to give you an idea that he's moving his head right there. I actually do like this here where she just decides to jump, fly away, and you get the feeling of movement with the way it affects his hair, the expression on his face. He definitely wasn't expecting that. When she lands, the way it affects her skirt. You see the movements right there, the fire around her when she comes down. I think the next one I enjoy for movement is right here with the expression on his face with him blocking. You get the feeling of the block there. You actually kind of, again, just the impact. I like the emotion you get with just her eyes there. Actually, this isn't bad either. Let's see, I thought that there was... I'm sorry, that's just a funny look on his face. When the guy gets up there in his face. His expression, it says, whoopsie, hold on, let me turn off that top, hold on, there we go. Yeah, I mean, the artwork in this edition is by no means perfect, but there are more periods where I just feel something. Now, granted, these are characters that I am very fond of, very familiar with. Isom does not have that going for it right now, unfortunately, and that's not its fault. It's a brand new comic. And as it grows, and as the artist has a chance to perfect his use of the comic medium, we will probably see an improvement in the way that he makes use of panels, of storytelling. Right now, he's just very much the beginning, and it shows. Let's see. Let's do this one. This one was a good comic series. This was The Arrow and the Bat, part 1 of 5. I wish Ollie had his beard at this point, but he does not. Look, I might have to reread this. There is just the expressions and everything with this particular comic. And you do have things like, here's our storytelling 2 weeks earlier. Remember, I was talking about movement? You can tell what this guy's doing here. He's swirling that chain around his head. I like the expression on his face. Oh, Ollie. Typical superhero questioning stuff, I guess. Oh, that's right. This kid was using drugs, and he had stolen, so Ollie was taking and returning it. Gee, I wish, he had been maybe... Sorry, Ollie's history with kids with drugs, interesting. He had there's a storyline with his ward and drugs. It's a very classic storyline. Yeah. But he did not handle it well, let's just put it that way. Look at it. Love the expression on her face. Let's see. Oh, this must be one of the periods of time when Ollie lost his fortune. I like some of the other artwork and expressions. I mean, look at that. Character what? Now here is this set of panels here. I love the way it uses shadows. I love how you increase the intensity. You start off far, you get closer, you get closer. And I think they made use of this. I want to say, I haven't actually read the comic, but they mention in the Death of Superman comic, big deal. From what I understand, as you got closer to the big climactic event, you went from, more panels a page to fewer and fewer and fewer until finally at the very end you were in I'm not even sure if they went to 2 pages for the final panel. It was that they got you closer and closer and closer to the action until, boom, you were right in it. And that's kind of it's the amping up of the tension. You're getting closer in. Good use of movement. And I wish that maybe Eisen had maybe used some things with the emotive drawing, because that does so much of your storytelling. I don't know that artists made good enough use of it. Nice there. Again, nice use of movement with him using his bow as a, bludgeoning tool. Oh dear, Ollie was having a very bad day, that's right. Very bad week or whatever. Why is Bruce wearing pink? Probably because he's being Brucey right now. Oh dear. So you have a confrontation between Ollie and Bruce. I love some of these panels. Just Ollie getting obnoxious and Bruce, because he's being Brucey right now, instead of Batman, is just playing completely dumb. You can definitely... Oh man, I love the way this artist shows emotion here. Look, between this expression and then him walking away. Nice. And I like... Okay, so the artist, besides using the panels to show all his emotion, Bruce's lack thereof, this complete is very well done. I'm going to have to look up this comic. This was a good comic. Legends of the Bat. Legends of the Dark Knight, The Arrow and the Bat. 5-part series. I'm sure it comes in a single collection. Okay, so speaking of collections, oh gosh, what's next? Shall I go artwork? Let's go, actually, starting with All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder. Great artwork, because we're talking about Jim Lee here, who actually, I kind of feel like once he took over DC, this is where some of the issues with the New 52 and stuff came in, which is a shame, because he's an amazing artist. And then you have, doing the writing here, Frank Miller, who I don't always like the way he chooses to characterize, but man, for one thing, he does know how to do storytelling. For another thing, you got Jim Lee with the artwork. Look at Black Canary there, Dinah. And just the feel, I think that's part of what the old comics didn't mind too, is that feeling, not having problems to show like the everyday guy with the beer gut and like some of this more average thing. And even though I don't necessarily agree with the way they characterized Bruce in this, you have the emotion with the young Dick. Bruce being an absolute, awful person here. Even though it's out of character for someone who would try taking a child who just lost his parents, by the way, it is a good example of the artwork of Jim Lee and the storytelling through artwork. How blank Dick looks. He literally just lost his parents. So he is in that zoning out phase. You got Vicky Vale there. Good artwork with her. And the shadowings with, I think it's Alfred was driving. That's right, because she was on a date with Bruce. So, there's never that really, I think, let's look here. When you're also seeing, I feel like besides the lines being pristine, they're fairly thick with the inking here. Whereas even when you have fairly pristine lines, look at Bruce's expression versus Vicky's. But also look at the inking and the artwork. Gosh, I'm really not. Can I light up all the way? Let's do that a little bit more so you can actually see better. Hopefully that's not too bright. Okay. You have the crosshatch shadowing, which Jim Lee does do a lot of, which is great. Dick's expression. Then when he catches himself, that bit of a daredevil expression tends to get... there's just so much with the artwork, feeling of movement. I think he does a phenomenal job with the expressions of a young Dick Grayson, even pre-Robin. Then you have the expression with, you can actually tell that Bruce just turned his head. There's a feeling not only of emotion, but of movement. And it probably doesn't show very well on the screen. Let's see. Actually, you know what's a good feeling of movement? And Barbara Gordon, young Barbara Gordon, throwing herself at her dad for a kiss. I mean, there is a nice feeling of movement. You can feel his movement, you can feel her movement. Very nice. I actually don't remember seeing that panel. That whole section with her. Her coming up the stairs, there she is, feeling a movement there. I just love this entire section with her and Jim. And then her leaving the house. Great section, great expression. And then you have the shadowing with him getting on the phone. Is he talking to... Yeah, he's talking about the idea of Batman stuff. So, and you have throughout there. Okay, remember I was talking about introducing a character? You got Jim coming in. Jim Gordon. This is what he is. He's of the police. And so, good cop. Barbara Gordon talks about her age here. And then talks a little bit about her. This is the way you introduce characters. This is what Isom is missing. They're using, even though these characters have been around forever, they are using this as a reintroducing of the characters. I don't think their way of doing this went very far. This is just for the one issue, because I don't think a lot of people cared with the way Bruce was characterized or the way they handled most things in here. But the introducing of the characters was done so much better in here than in here, because you got, when you introduce each character, like this little bit of information about them. Let's see what else. And I never tire of showing that the good, showing the effect of rain on hair, those kind of things. What else here? Expression, cross-hatching, inking, just great. I mean, one thing you got to give for Jim Lee for sure is artwork. This man gives masterclass of art every single time. Any of his work, that includes Hush, that includes this one. I think he did some artwork for Marvel as well. He might have done some X-Men work. Great artist. Not so great at managing DC once he took over, in my opinion. Okay, so next one, we're almost down to the last two. I'm sure I've been going on forever. Yes, I most definitely have been going on forever. Okay, so this is Bruce Wayne Murderer. And right off the bat, just the introduction with the shadowing. And most of what I was going to show was going to be, first of all, you do get, each section has slightly different artwork because these are taken from different series. Like you have, I think when they put this together, it went over different runs. So you had, Chuck Dixon in here as writer, Ed Brubaker, Greg Rucka, Devin Grayson. Yeah, these are names, well-known names. Don't recognize as many of the pencilers here, but this is, a lot of very good authors, very good writers involved with this. But I mean, talk about introductions and character. You have Batman's face, and then you have this bunch of boxes, which is classic way of introducing a character. And I feel like if they had done that with Isom, done more of that with Isom, the reader would feel less out of the loop. And let's see. Actually talking about, let's see, let me go to sections I wanted to show. It's a little bit later. This probably was in the Nightwing, one of the Nightwing ones, introductions of the part of the comic. I mean, okay, so Just trying to find the one I'm looking for. Okay. Feeling of movement when Dick tackles this guy. Even though, okay, it feels a bit caricature-y, I love some of the artwork that is in this particular run of Nightwing. And it's not always necessarily the best artwork even for him, but it's just fun artwork. I don't know the shadows are used to the best effect here. There's a little bit... This one does suffer a bit from the pristine inking, although not nearly as much as Isom does. I think what mostly saves this particular issue is the fact that the artwork is not just... There's character in this artwork. So I think that is very... that helps a lot where maybe the inking isn't quite as good. Actually, I wanted to bring a character who actually looks somewhat similar to Isom. I don't know if the nose is the same, but the general blockiness of the face is. I want a similar face shot. I'm trying to find an expression that's similar for Isom. And I can't quite get the similar angle. I think, like I said, I think Isom's nose is a slightly different shape, but I think they have a similar blockiness to the face. So I wanted to find a similar shot for Isom to compare the two. Or maybe I'll compare this other guy, because it is more similar. The guy's nose is different, for sure. But, and the angle is different. But you have similar, you got this picture, and then you've got this guy's picture. And I feel like you get maybe a bit more, and maybe it's not a fair shot, but there's just a little bit more something there, and I'm not quite sure what it is. I do like right here, though, where he's just face palms. What else? I'm trying to see what else might have been in this particular comic. Just Barbara here. I can't read what, I haven't read what the thing says there, but her expression does almost looks, I would say, smug, and actually that you do get a little bit of that with her expression. But I do like this, the kind of shock there. What else? I don't think I have as much for this particular book. This was a good comic run. Not necessarily because this is my favorite artwork in here. It was good artwork, but not enough for me to want to compare it necessarily to Isom in the way I have other ones with artwork. I enjoyed the storytelling for this, but they didn't necessarily make the best, even the best use of the different ways they can use panels. Now, having said that, you do now have, like I mentioned otherwise, you have a big panel in the background, and then you have these little panels around it. So that is something that Isom does fail to do, is that kind of thing. And actually, this comic makes use of that several times. Some use of shadow here for emotion. So you know what I want to find like that? I like the use of this for, I think it's probably Doc Leslie. Sometimes you don't need to see everything. Sometimes the shadows do talking for you. And because there are so many different artists in this particular issue, you do have varying levels of artwork, varying degrees of how good the artwork is. Because one of the artists who does a lot of the artwork, particularly in the Nightwing run, I think it's when Chuck Dixon was writing Nightwing. I didn't care as much for the artist for the Chuck Dixon run of Nightwing. Style was interesting. It was very much full of character, like you saw the caricatures, but it can be sometimes blocky. It can be sometimes a bit odd. But what was my favorite run of Chuck Dixon, of Nightwing art wise, but I did like the Chuck Dixon stories. That was during Dick's run as a cop as well, and so that was probably my favorite period for him. Final one I'm going to show. This was a good story. Most because I tend to like Batman Superman mashups. Who wrote this one? Of course, this is Jeff Loeb. That's why it's so good. Batman Superman Public Enemies. And this here has one of the best introductions. And so I'm going to do it panel to panel. The dream always begins the same. That's the first one. My parents put me in the rocket as the planet Krypton breaks apart. And then underneath that, you have Bruce's dream always begins the same. He's holding his parents' hand. And then Clark has his panel where he says, I can only imagine it's difficult for them as their world died around them. And Bruce's panel says, I can only imagine the fear that gripped them. And then you can see coming in the shadows of his dream. Then you have the bigger panel talking about how as you get closer to the main focus, it gets bigger. So you have, I don't know, I actually remember, or if it's just what I picture in my mind, the planet shattering around me, the colors, the universe being delivered to me, my future out there, and the great unknown. So Clark's emotional event has gotten bigger. Now for Bruce's, there's actually great shadowing here too. I will never forget the sound of the gun firing, the pieces of metal ripping through the only two people I ever loved, the blood, the acrid smell of gunpowder, my future going black before my eyes. So using not only the pictures to tell a story and the use of creative use of panels, but also the boxes, which are so important in comic book writing. And I think even more important for these two particular characters is the juxtaposition of their stories. Side by side, panel by panel, just showing how their stories kind of mirror, like how, just seeing the different events side by side and how they are like parallels but mirroring each other. It's really interesting. So then you have Clark arriving at the farm, crashing there, and then Bruce. My parents lay in the street bleeding to death. It seemed like hours before anyone came to help. This is Park Row in Gotham City. They call it Crime Alley now. And so you have, Clark crashing, and then talk about a great piece of emotional storytelling without seeing anyone's faces. All you have is the bloody picture and the boxes of information. And then up against each other, Clark seeing his adoptive parents for the first time, and then the classic Bruce Wayne, my parents have died picture, side by side. Then this is, and I think they've done mirroring type pictures like this before for Clark and Bruce, but Clark's side says, my parents taught me to side with justice. Next little thing, I came from another planet with powers and abilities far beyond those of other men. I am known as a hero, an inspiration champion. It's been a good life. And on Bruce's side, my parents' killer was never brought to justice. I cloak myself in the very shadows of the gunman used to hide his face. The gunman used to hide his face from me. I am known as an urban myth, a frightening creature, the bogeyman. It's not a life I would wish on anyone. And there, the light with Clark and the darkness with Bruce, and the importance of using this comparison for the following storyline. It's a great beginning, a great bit of character introduction for characters that are well established, have been around forever. But this is how you introduce characters, using creative storytelling with the way you draw it, like not only the way that you use the inking and all that, but the pictures you choose to represent, to tell stories, like just having no face to show the motion, but Bruce's shoe and the blood at his feet and his mom at his feet and the pearls. And then the comparison between the light and the dark. What else? You have, I love something as simple as you don't always need to see everything. You can have in silhouette a fight. Talking about movement. Clark punching, what's his name? Metallo. I do like whoever this artist is. He does a good job with expression. Actually, look there. I'm not sure how well you can see it. Again, talking about good creative things. You're seeing Metallo. I'm not quite sure what he's facing that he's mirroring, and it looks like some sort of glass building. But you see the back of Metallo's head. But what you're then seeing is Metallo's face in the mirror and Clark coming at him. And that is just, a good use of your surroundings and a great use of storytelling. That's a great panel. Let's see. What else do we have here? Again, I like this when they do this to Bruce sometimes, where you don't show his face. Even though, like, when he's out of the shadow, his face is visible. It's some good storytelling. Again, you're using, Bruce is mostly in shadow here. And talk about movement. Bruce just got snacked hard time. What else? Big surprise on Clark's face there. What else do I have to show? This is a good panel. Expression, just the feeling of that bomb that he used, Bruce covering his face. This such a simple panel, but I don't know, there's so much, just a great panel. You can feel, it's almost like you feel the tears in Bruce's glove there. It feels real, the blood dripping down onto Clark. And actually, if you look really closely at it, you can see the cuts in each of their hands. When you look at the comic itself. I always love when they could show emotion with only the holes in Bruce's mask. Look at the expression on his, like, if you look really closely, he has kind of the expression on his face as well as on Clark's, without seeing Bruce's face. Gosh, I could just go through this comic so much. This is just a fun comic. And it's not even that it is the peak necessarily, but it's just a great comic. I like this artist. He's a bit, different. I do feel like you're getting a good sense of movement with Dick here. I do also really love this Luthor with the fists. Just, I don't know, this is just a fun panel. Dap. What else? Oh, nice bit with that sense of movement there. Yeah. Oh, crazy face there. I don't know. There's just so much more emotion when you're looking at some of these comics. Clark's expression. Yeah, just a great comic. If you have not read Batman, Superman, Public Enemies, I do recommend it. I do love this ending shot of the two of them. Bruce once again cloaked in shadow. Clark, as he should be, in light. Even though actually this is really good. Backdrop from Clark walking away from the flames. I don't know, you feel the emotion, the dark in it to a certain extent. He couldn't find Luthor. But, ooh, look at that. Doesn't that bring you in? So yeah, there's something about these other comics that Isom was trying for, and perhaps it will reach this at some point. But its biggest issues, in my opinion, is the inking. It feels too pristine. The shadows just aren't used to their full effect. It's rather boring use of panels. Just panel, 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 panel. No creative panel use. No use of the, like you saw with the ollie, where you had far away from sides and then closer, where to bring that up, that intensity. The intensity never felt like it was there to begin with, really, not let alone upped. There was not a point where I really felt stressed for the character. A point where I really cared about the character. So emotional impact with the art and the storytelling was lacking. The inking just felt too pristine. There was not a feeling of movement necessarily. And the introduction of the characters, like I showed in multiple comics with long-standing characters, a lot of comics chose to reintroduce these characters with the little block narrative boxes, because for all they know, that is your first comic with Batman, with Superman, with Daredevil. So now I didn't see that as much of the Daredevil one, but I think that was in the middle of a particular, that might have been number 2 of that particular storyline. But Isom, as the first one, just fell down in its primary objective, which should have been to introduce this character and to make us interested in this character. And unfortunately, as I wanted to be interested in Isom, and I just don't feel like I know him, really. I know things about him. I know he has his sister. I know he has a niece. I know what he's there for. But I don't know why he's at the point he is. I don't know how he got his abilities. I don't know why he got his abilities. I don't know why he stopped being in the city and using his abilities. I don't know a lot of things. And unfortunately, the comic writer did not do didn't sufficiently make me interested enough to want to know more about Isom for Isom's sake. I want to give this comic another chance. I want to see it grow over time. But at this point, Isom, I don't even know his first name. What is your first name, man? They must say it at some point. Does his sister say it? Avery. Right now, Avery can't stand against Clark or Bruce. Even someone like Foggy, who I care about them, not only because they've been around forever, but because the art, the storytelling, everything around that, the creative choices have made me care about those characters, even if I just picked up my first Daredevil today. If I was to turn around and pick up a Doctor Strange, an older Doctor Strange from, before any newer changes have been made, I'm not sure that Marvel's may fall into the same rut as maybe you're seeing with Isom now, if you're not focused on storytelling as much as you should be. But if I was to pick up an Iron Man or a Doctor Strange from around, let's say 2000s, early 2000s, I suspect that they will do much the same things to draw me in and say, okay, this about Doctor Strange, that about Doctor Strange. If I was to read a She-Hulk, because I actually am not terribly, I know the basics about that character, but I have not read that character. So I would anticipate, if I read any of these classic stories, there's a reason these characters are classic characters and have been around for so long. And part of it is because they've been written well. Yes, for sure. Like they've have all these stories for so many periods, for so long, but they keep getting stellar writers. And yes, you might have a run that's not great. But these characters keep coming back because they have the bones behind them. They have if they make a mistake, they end up trying to get a new writer to replace them and other artists to make them dynamic again. Hopefully Isom will realize that, okay, we made some mistakes, let's improve upon them. And then the next Isom that I see will improve upon what we see here. What else do I have to say? I'm going to say some recommendations before I close. I would recommend some comics that I do not have here in physical form. I mentioned Hush a couple times. I also would like to mention so it's Hush, which also includes I think it's actually a Superman Batman. I think Hush is considered that. At least Superman's in part of it. So Hush, Batman Year One, Long Halloween, Dark Victory. Those are all Batmans. There are some Daredevils out there that I can't immediately bring to mind. There is a Frank Miller introduction to Daredevil that I don't think it's just called Daredevil Year One. I can't remember. It might be Daredevil Year One. Frank Miller does an introduction to the Daredevil character, which is well done. I actually remember liking the artwork for that one too. That's the one immediately for Daredevil that comes to mind. Oh, there's a good one. There's a couple good ones with him and Punisher. I tend to look up ones that have Matt and Punisher together because I do generally enjoy those. I liked the Defenders. I think it was a 4-part series where they had the more recent Defenders, which was Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Danny Rand, who I believe it is Iron Fist, and then of course Matt as Daredevil. That is a more recent run. That is enjoyable though. One of my favorites, even though it might be a bit niche, there are 2 different series. They're both called Brave and the Bold, and I'm not sure how old they are, but one is Brave and the Bold, and they're just a bunch of collections of random team-ups. So you have people like a Green Arrow, Deadman, and Nightwing team up. That's one comic. And then you have Bruce with Green Lantern. That's another team up. Then you have, it's Supergirl Green Lantern, a different one. And Batman and the first Flash, the one with the metal helmet with the little wings on them. I can't remember what his name was. So that's one set of comics. That's one set of Brave and the Bold. But there's another Brave and the Bold series, which was Green Lantern and the Flash. And this is Barry Allen's Flash, Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. They've always traditionally been the best of friends in the comics. And I would call this particular collection of Brave and the Bold like the buddy flicks. This is a buddy comic where you just have comics of the 2 of them just, having adventures together at like 2 pals. And that was a fun series. I mean, it's not a complex storyline where you go over multiple things like you have with, an intense storyline like you have either with Bruce Wayne, Murderer, Bruce Wayne, Fugitive, or the Green Arrow one I showed you, where you have an ongoing storyline that has a level of intensity to it. The Brave and the Bold with the Flash and Green Lantern are a series of, short stories that each encompass their own comic, and they can be standalone, but they are just fun, buddy comics. And those are palate cleansers. And in this day and age, I think of where everything is a bit more intense, it's every once in a while just fun to read a Brave and the Bold. And the thing that also works in Brave and the Bold's favor is where it's maybe not as intense in some of the storytelling. It's very good in your character relationships. You can tell how the characters care about each other. There's consistency in characterizations, and these are characters that you do end up caring about. So yeah, those are my comic recommendations that come off the top of my head. I mean, I'm very fond of the Gotham Knights run. I know that there's just so many good comics out there. I can think of so many different ones I can't necessarily put a name to because I've read so many over the years. But yeah, I mean, if I would recommend, if you're going to get into comics for the first time, look at in late 90s, early 2000 comics. I feel like that was the peak of comic writing, in my opinion. And yeah, just there's some great artwork there. There's some great storytelling. You're gonna hit some duds, but I feel like ISOM is trying to aim for that period of time, and I think it just needs a chance to grow. I think it just needs a chance to find its feet, find enough other creatives to help with this. I don't know that there were a whole lot of people who were, involved with this project because it's such a new project that I think, ISOM just needs time. It's, it's brand new on the scene. It's a brand new company. I'm like I said, I'm sure if we were watching if we pull out the first Batman, the first Superman, the first Captain America, and compared them to ISOM, I think that ISOM would do pretty well. So, no hate for ISOM. There's a lot of things it could have done better, but it's new. I'm gonna give it a shot the next time it comes out because, yeah, I mean, we do maybe need some fresh blood in the comic industry and need some fresh characters and just something new and fun again. So yeah, that is my very long comic nerd out. This is not a typical booktube. This is not going to be necessarily a repeat. That is for my non-existent comic channel that will never be. But yeah, I hope that you enjoy. Interested in hearing your thoughts. If you think that ISOM stands up better than I did, if you are interested in ISOM or any of those other comics that I mentioned. As for people who had other, videos that they wanted to see, are waiting for comments, are waiting for answers to their comments, I will get to you. Like I said, this was sort of a just an inspiration, something I just suddenly wanted to do, even though I wasn't quite ready to make another video. I wanted to put a little bit more thought into my next video. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me. I hope that you got something out of that, and have a great day, evening, night, whatever time it is where you're at. God bless. Bye.